Okay guys, so today's lesson is our first lesson on the Ulster Plantation. So what I want you to think about today is, before we start, so I want to think back over what we've looked at in Irish history so far. So think back, last time we looked at Irish history we were looking at the early Christian Ireland, and that started around the year 430 AD and went up to the year 700 or 800 AD. Okay, now we're going to skip forward by about 800 years here and we're coming up to 1610. Okay, so in a few minutes I'm going to go through what happened in between, some of the basic stuff that happened in between, but some of you might know this already from primary school, so think back yourselves. Are you aware of anything that happened in those 800 years? Okay, as we go through you're also going to see there's a number of tasks. Okay, so you see on the video at the moment task 1 in blue. Okay, so anytime you see one of these tasks I want you to pause the video, spend about 5 to 10 minutes completing that task. Okay, and that's what you're going to submit to me on Teams. Okay, so the first task we're going to start off with today is using your textbooks. So this textbook on your iPad, so pages 131 to 133, answer the following questions. What does the term plantation mean in the context of Irish history? 2. What does the term the Pale refer to? 3. Where were the first plantations? And 4. Why do you think we study the Ulster Plantation instead of the other plantations which occurred in Ireland? Think about modern Ireland, think about why the Ulster Plantation in particular might be the one that we think is most important. Okay, so that's going to be those ideas are going to cover most of what this lesson is about. So I'm going to ask you to pause here for spend about 5 to 10 minutes and get an answer, 1 to 2 sentences for each of those questions. Okay, so you should have the answers to those questions by now, and as we go through the video you'll see that we'll come to the answers to those, so you can check your answers as we go along. Okay, so the objectives for today. 1, we want to develop an understanding of the context in which the Ulster Plantation occurred. That means we want to know what was going on at the time. We want to have a little bit of history of what happened before the Ulster Plantation, and what life was like at the time, and why the plantation happened. I want you to understand what a plantation is. Okay, what does the term plantation refer to? And you need to have an awareness of the effect of a changing English monarchy. Okay, so kings and queens of England are changing, and why that has such a big effect on the island of Ireland. Okay, so I said at the start that we're skipping over 800 years of history here. Now we don't want to totally ignore these 800 years, so we'll go through some of the kind of basic stuff. That's just a very, very rough outline of what happened in between. Okay, now I would suggest taking this down in your copy, so draw a timeline in your copy and take down some brief notes about what we're going through. This will help you to understand when you're coming back for revision what's happened in the times that we've skipped. Okay, sometimes we're not going to be studying in detail. So when we looked at early Christian Ireland, we know that Palladius, remember the Christian missionary Palladius, came to Ireland in about 431 AD to try and spread Christianity. We also know that around 432, so just a year after, that St. Patrick returned to Ireland to spread Christianity. So before this, Ireland is not a Christian country. Ireland is a pagan country with lots of different gods. Okay? And what we looked at when we were looking at these 400 years, we looked at how Christianity took over and kind of spread across the island. Right? So it started with Palladius and St. Patrick, right? And continued on up through the next few hundred years, up until 700 to 800. Okay? And this is when the monasteries, we looked at the monasteries in quite a lot of detail. This is when the monasteries were really at their height. Okay? This is when the monasteries were at their strongest. Right, when we looked at the abbots, and we looked at all the different work and the book of Kells and stuff, most of that's happening in these few hundred years. So by the time we reach 800, Ireland's a very, very Christian country now. Okay? The Catholic religion is very, very strong in Ireland. Christian ideas are very, very strong in Ireland. Okay, and you know it took that few hundred years, but Ireland is still quite a poor country. Okay. And it's, you know, we talked about how the writing and a lot of skills were confined within those monasteries. Now, the times that were after that, a number of things happened. Okay, so a lot of people have looked at this in primary school. In the year 1169 AD, King Dermot, one of the kings of Ireland. So this is a king, one of the small kings of Ireland. Ireland divided up into lots of small kingdoms. Dermot was one of the kings. Dermot wants to take more land, okay, and his lands are under threat. Okay, so what Dermot does is he goes and he invites the Normans. He looks for help from outside of Ireland to get people to come and help him to defend his kingdom and to consolidate his power. Okay. Because of this, just a number of people, the Norman lords, come over via England and they start to take a lot of power. King Henry II of England declares himself the feudal lord of Ireland. Okay, so if we look back to medieval times, we think about the feudal system. Okay, he was the lord. He declared that he was lord of Ireland. So that means, as we know, when we look at the feudal system, that he would have claimed that he owned all of the land in Ireland, and everyone there had to be loyal to him. However, when we think about this, there was only one king who invited him over. Maybe the Irish people and all the other kings aren't going to be too happy about this. So over the next few hundred years, from 1200 to 1500, there's a number of attempts made by the British forces, by their kings, and by the rulers who sent people over to Ireland to take over, to try and get rid of Irish culture. They're trying to suppress Irish culture, make Ireland act more like England, to get rid of, bring in the English language, bring in the English laws, bring in the English ways of doing things, bring in English culture. Okay? But these keep failing. They don't really take much hold. Right? They're not really that strong. They don't work that well. And by the time we get to around the year 1500, most of the English power is confined to a small area known as the Pale. I want to talk about the Pale in a second in a bit more detail. What you need to know is, for the moment, is that the Pale is very much where the English power is consolidated. Okay, that's where it's definitely within the control of English culture, but outside of the Pale, very few other areas are. Now, this is some of the things that we're going to look at, over the course of this lesson. So in 1541, King Henry VIII, now you remember King Henry VIII, from when we looked at the Reformation, okay, he was the one who changed because of his issues with his many wives, he changed the religion of England. But King Henry VIII declared himself King of Ireland. So no longer feudal lord, but king, a higher state of power. He declared he had more power in Ireland than his predecessors had. Right. In 1556 then, we have what's called our first plantation, and this is the Laois Offaly plantation, and this is under Queen Mary. Okay, so Henry did try to bring some power over to Ireland, and then one of his successors decided they're going to try to consolidate, take more control and really take control of Ireland, and the Laois Offaly plantation begins in 1556. Now we'll learn in a little while before the end of the lesson that's not very successful. We then have in 1586, under Queen Elizabeth I, we have the Munster plantation. Okay, so the Munster plantation takes place. Again, the Munster plantation is not very successful, unfortunately for Elizabeth. They don't really get what they need from the Munster plantation. Okay, but this all changed, and the one we're going to be looking at is the Ulster plantation, and this starts around the year 1610 under King James I. Okay, so this is really the strongest plantation. Now, we're going to talk in a few minutes about the Tudors and the Stuarts. Okay, all of the plantations, these started under the Tudors, so Henry VII, Henry VIII, and then up through Mary and Elizabeth. These are all Tudors. However, their plantations weren't very successful. It was when King James, who was actually a Stuart, is his second name, so King James I, he's a Stuart, he's in charge of the Ulster plantation, and this is the most successful one. Now, after the Ulster plantation, we also had Cromwellian plantations, which had a big effect on areas around Drogheda and down Wexford. And these also it had attempts, okay, but we're not going to look at that in too much detail because we're not really going to go into Cromwell. It's quite a detailed part of English history. We're mainly looking at the Ulster plantation, and you might be able to think yourselves why the Ulster plantation in particular we might think of being most historically significant in Ireland. Okay, so we talked about the Pale a few minutes ago. So if we go back to the timelines really quickly, we said that in the orange box side down in the middle at the bottom, that English power in Ireland is confined to the Pale. So the Pale is this area here in yellow. Okay, so it stretches from just below Dublin, so around Dalkey, some claim down to as far as Bray in the south, up to around Dundalk in the north. Okay, it also goes out towards the towns of Naas in Kildare, and as far as I know, out near Trim in Meath. And this is the main area that the English crown has power over in medieval Ireland. Right? Very, very strong within the Pale. But you see all that green area outside the Pale, there's very little power of the English forces. Okay? The English have very little power out there. But who does have power is the Irish chiefs, native Irish chiefs. So it's all divided up. It's not one big country. It's very much divided up into little small chieftains, little smaller tribes, smaller kings who own different areas of it. Right, so life inside the Pale, you have controlled by the English crown. They follow English common law, and you're going to look into that in a few minutes in your books. And they spoke the English language. Outside of the Pale, it is not controlled by the English crown, so it's controlled by the native Irish leaders. Right? They follow what's called Brehon law, and they spoke Irish language. Okay, so they're kind of the main differences. But you really need to, the Pale is a very, very important idea. You really need to understand what the Pale was. Okay, so task 2 for today. I want you to copy, you see this blue box, this blue table on the board, on the video. Copy that into your hardbacks, okay? And then go to page 131 and 132 of your textbooks, textbook on your iPad. Right? And I want you to use the information on those pages and the information I've just given you. I want you to fill in that little box there in your copies. So again, you're going to need to pause here for about 5 or 10 minutes to copy that over and then start to fill it in. Now, if you find that you're getting that done very quickly and you want to challenge yourself to do a bit more extra work to make sure you're really understanding everything that's going on, I want you to look down instead of page on page 132. There's a little box that talks about Brehon law and common law. Tell me which of those, read through what they're about. Tell me which one do you think you would prefer to live with, and why do you think you would prefer to live with that legal system. Okay, so you're going to pause here and spend 5 to 10 minutes on that work. Okay, so you should have that work completed by now, and again you're going to take a picture of that at the end of the lesson and submit it to me on Teams alongside the first task. Okay, so the last thing we want to go through for today is just to understand what's going on with the English system. Right, so we have the Tudors, are the royal family in England at this time. Right, so this starts in 1485. King Henry VII comes into power, and he's the first of the Tudor family to be king of England. Right, the rulers, their Tudor side ruled for the next 120 years. This is the family who's in charge. Okay, so you can see there's 5 of them up there in the top corner of the video. These are the Tudor leaders. Okay, so Henry VII to start, all the way down to Elizabeth I. Okay, now the Tudors wanted to take more control in Ireland. Right? Over their time, they wanted to be much more powerful in Ireland, and by the time that their reign kind of comes to an end, they had succeeded to a large extent. They had taken quite a bit of power. Okay, now some of the things that they did, the power may not have lasted much longer, but they did do a lot to take power over Ireland. Okay? So it starts with Henry VII and goes the whole way down through the generations up until about 1603, and that's when Elizabeth I passes away and James I becomes king. Right, so they want to take their power and they want to move it outside of the Pale. But when they start doing this, they do it the way people normally do to take over land, and they start fighting, they start wars. And they send our soldiers out and they pay the soldiers and pay for their armies, pay for the horses, ammunition, or weapons, etc., and start fighting wars. Now, we know that wars are very, very expensive. So after a few years, they start to realize this. And they realize that they can't keep fighting these wars. They can't keep sending money over to Ireland. They have England to rule as well. So they can't keep sending money over to keep fighting the same wars in Ireland over and over again. So they come up with an idea of what's called the Plantations. This is a new way that they have come up with of taking over land. And what it involves is, one, you have your war. You send your army over and you defeat the native people, you defeat the native chiefs, and you take their land. Okay, so that's the first part of plantation, is fighting the normal war that they've been doing as all the time. Now, they need to find a way to keep their power though when they've done this. So this is what a plantation involves. And plantation involves, once you've taken over a land, you take the land away from people who used to own it, people who aren't loyal to you, take it away from your enemies, and you give it to your allies, give it to your followers. And these people are called the planters. So what you do is you take the land, you get someone who you know is loyal to you, you say, okay, here, you own all this land now. I want you to move over to Ireland. I want you to be in control of this land. When you're there, I want you to use the English language. I want you to use English law, make sure everyone follows it. Okay? And you will, gain lots and lots of money, lots of riches from owning this land. And you'll have lots of power because you own all this land. However, you need to defend this land. So this means that the kings and queens of England no longer need to pay for this, okay? Because the people that they're giving the land to are going to pay. But the landers, those planters, have to be loyal. So this is the way that they start to take a lot of power. So they start to implement this policy in a number of different areas. And the first one place they implemented is what's known called the Laois Offaly Plantation. So obviously it's around Laois and Offaly. And they start sending people over and learning in this way. Now, the Laois Offaly Plantation ultimately is not successful. Okay, it does work for a while, and they start taking power, okay, and they become much more. Their power does extend outside the pale, but it ultimately is not successful. Okay, it just doesn't work. They don't get everyone on board. Right? So they try again in Munster, right? But Munster, as you know, is at the west side of Ireland, so it's very, very far away from England, and it's a quite harsh land. Okay, to be able to farm and be able to make money from. And so eventually, over time, this becomes too difficult to keep their followers there, and it ends up being a failure. However, when we get to 1610 and we come to Ulster, we know that the English rulers have had a lot of practice having their plantations, so they are much more organised, and when they go up to Ulster, they follow a similar system, okay, but they do it much, much better, and this is the successful Ulster plantation. So that is the context, okay? So I know there's a lot of information there to go through, okay? So basically what you need to remember is the Tudors came to power. When they came to power, the English only had control of the Pale in Ireland. They wanted to take more power, so they started fighting wars in Ireland, but that turned out to be very expensive, and so they came up with this idea of plantations. So you'll see here is your third task for today. I want you to write a summary explaining what happened during plantation. So basically just turn that information in front of you into a short paragraph. So that should take 5 to 10 minutes as well. You can also use the information on page 132 and 133 of your textbook for that. If you get that done very quickly and you really want to push yourselves, there's a challenge there to look up the terms surrender and regrant. Very important term for those early plantations, and maybe write me 2 or 3 sentences explaining that. So again, that work should take 5 to 10 minutes. Okay, so once you have that completed, you can submit it to me on Teams alongside the other 2 tasks.